Avaim, our Honoring Our Parents series, Honor Thy Father and Mother, Ancient Obligation, Contemporary Issues, to focus a little bit on just some of the interesting and intriguing aspects of the incredibly important mitzvah of honoring our parents. Parents' wishes for their children. We also spoke about the difficult topic of mental illness, dealing with parents with mental illness while still preserving the proper honor and dignity for parents. What I'd like to focus on today, just in a very short online shir, is the halachos concerning step-parents. What is the nature of the obligation regarding honoring a step-parent? So amazingly enough, there's a fascinating Gemara in Maseches Ksuvis. The Gemara on Daf Kuf Gimel Amud Aleph, page 103a, records the following episode. Tan Rabban, the rabbis taught, B'shas Pitiraso Shal Rebbe, when the great sage Rabbi Huda Nasi, the codifier of the Mishnah, was on his deathbed, he said the following, Amar, Libnai ani tzarech. He said, I need my sons. Please call my sons in. Nichnesu banav etzlo, his sons came and of course were by their father's bedside. Amar lahem, and he said to them the following. Actually, the Talmud lists a number of different instructions that he gave his son on the deathbed, but the Gemara here focuses on one specific item. Amar lahem, he said to them, Hizaru bichvod imchem. Be careful, be vigilant with the honor of your mother. So what Rabbi Yehuda Nasi seems to be saying to his sons is that even when I'm gone and I'm no longer here, I want to make sure that you still continue to honor your mother. Asks the Gemara, what does that mean that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is telling his sons that even once I, your father, die, continue to respect and honor your mother? After all, even when Rebbe, the father, dies, the sons still have an obligation to honor their mother from a biblical perspective. Ultimately, again, the pasuk says, honor your father and mother, meaning the mitzvah of kavod, the mitzvah to honor a parent, is both for the father and the mother. Why does Rebbe have to give his sons a specific obligation to honor their mother, even once Rebbe is dead? To which the Gemara answers, Eshes Avhavi, because this woman was not the children's biological mother. So Rebbe's first wife, the mother of his sons, passed away. Rebbe remarried. And now Rebbe is commanding his sons that even once I am gone, you have an obligation to go ahead and honor your stepmother, my wife. So the Gemara says, Eshes avnami doraisi. But there's Hebrew, the word es is extraneous. You could have just said kabed avicha v'imecha. But it adds the word es. Es means and. The Gemara understands that the word es usually comes to include something else. So when it says es avicha, and your father, zu eshes avicha, this refers to the wife of your father, even if she's not your biological mother. Ve'es imecha, zu bal imecha, this refers to the house of my biological parent. We learned that out from the extra word es. Kabed, it could have just said kabed avicha v'imecha, honor your father and mother. Instead it says kabed es avicha, the es imecha. The es before my father and the es before my mother. Both of those esen are there to include an additional person. Who does it come to include? It comes to include the spouse of my biological parent. So as they say, hadra kushhold, to specifically charge them with this obligation from his deathbed. To which the Gemara says something amazing. Hani mili michayim, avala achar misalo. The obligation to honor a step-parent is only when the biological parent is still alive. But when the biological parent dies, there is no longer an obligation to go ahead and honor in a formal fashion the step-parent. And this Gemara is quite amazing because ultimately, again, what the Gemara is clearly telling us is that although there is an obligation to honor a step-parent, it appears that the obligation to honor a step-parent is an extension of honoring my biological parent. So I must honor a step-parent because let's think about this logically. If I don't give proper honor ultimately to the spouse of my biological parent, at the end of the day, that is a slight to my biological parent. So therefore, again, I have to honor my step-parent as an extension of honoring my biological parent. But Gemara tells us that this obligation only applies while the actual biological parent is alive. Once the biological parent passes away, then there is no longer an obligation to continue to honor the step parent, which makes sense because once the biological parent passes away, honor or dishonor of the step parent no longer is reflective on my honor towards my biological parent. Therefore, again, to loop it all the way back, Rebbe seems to call in his sons to tell them, even after I pass away, I'm asking you to continue to honor your stepmother. You may not be biblically obligated to do so, but I am asking you, as a father asking a child a deathbed request, continue to honor your stepmother. So we'll come back to that point in just a moment. The Rambam, in fact, codifies this as halacha. The Rambam writes, Chayiv adam lechabed es eshes aviv, afa pi she'eno imo. A man is obligated to honor his father's wife. Now, the Rambam's using father's wife, but it's the same thing, whether it's biological father with a stepmother or biological mother with a stepfather, same idea. The point is, I am obligated to honor the spouse of my biological parent, kol zman sha'aviv kayim. And here the Rambam says it explicitly. But this obligation to honor a step-parent only applies as long as my biological parent is still alive. Shazeh bichlal kibud aviv, because honoring my stepmother is an extension ultimately of honoring my father. So do I have to honor my mother, my biological mother's husband, as long as my mother is alive. But once the biological parent passes away, there is no longer an obligation to honor the step-parent. So again, the Rambam says it even more explicitly, that the obligation to honor a step-parent is an extension of the honor that I'm obligated to give to my parent. So when my parent is alive, I'm obligated to honor them, and therefore I must honor their spouse. But that obligation only lasts as long as the biological parent is alive. Once the biological parent passes away, I no longer have a halachic obligation to honor the step-parent. The Shulchan Aruch writes this as well. This is in Yoreh De'ah, Siman Reish Mem, Sif Chaf Aleph. Shulchan Aruch writes as follows: Chayiv adam lechabed eshes aviv. A man is obligated to give honor, to be mechabed, to honor his father's wife. Afa pi she'ena imo, even though this woman, my father's wife, is not my mother. Kol zman shaviv kayib. And again, the Shulchan Aruch echoes the same sentiment as the Rambam, but the obligation to honor the step-parent is only when the biological parent is alive. V'chayiv lechabed balimo. So listen to what he writes. Aval la'achar misa, after the biological parent passes away, eino chayiv bichvodam. I am no longer biblically obligated to go ahead and honor the step-parent. The Shulchan Aruch, however, adds in a postscript that the Rambam did not. Umikol makom, nevertheless, davar hagun lechabdom af la'achar misa. It is something very good, important, and beautiful to continue to honor a step-parent even after the death of the biological parent. So this is amazing. What the Shulchan Aruch does is he first discusses halacha. So halacha says that when my biological parent is alive, I'm obligated to honor the spouse of my biological parent. That is part of the kavod I give to my biological parent by giving their spouse, my step-parent, honor as well, because it's an extension of the honor I give to my biological parent. When the biological parent passes away, there is no longer an obligation to go and honor the step-parent. Shulchan Aruch says that is all true from a pure, I guess what we'll call a purist halachic perspective. Pure halacha is once the biological parent dies, there is no longer an obligation of kavod for the step-parent. But then the Shulchan Aruch decides to add in this postscript that even though there is no halachic imperative to go ahead and honor the step-parent after the death of the biological parent, it's davar hagun. It's important. It's something good. It's something meaningful to continue to go ahead and honor the step-parent even after the death of the biological parent. Where does the Shulchan Aruch get this concept from? So it's clear that the Shulchan Aruch gleans this idea from the episode with Rebbe. The fact that Rebbe chooses to call his sons in and goes out of his way to tell them, listen, my sons, even once I die, I want you to honor your stepmother, tells us that honoring a step-parent, although it might not be legally obligatory, halachically obligatory after the death of the biological parent, is something important, something beautiful, something meaningful, and something which should be done even if there is no obligation to do so. And I think on a deeper level, what the halacha is telling me is as follows, that this person, this step-parent, is someone who hopefully gave my parent much simcha, much happiness, companionship, a sense of belonging, a sense of a home, while my parent was alive. As parents of children, we know that when someone does something beautiful for our child, I feel incredibly grateful for that. I think what the halacha is telling us is that it works a generation above as well. When someone has done something beautiful for your parent, there's a certain sense of gratitude that should be expressed as well. Sometimes you see this when you go to a funeral for someone who has maybe suffered from an illness for a protracted amount of time and has had aides or nurses that have been by their sides. You sometimes see the beautiful gratitude that a family has towards an aide who was there by the bedside of their beloved parent. This person helped to take care of my parent, and I feel gratitude for that. I feel happiness for that. I don't have to recognize you at the funeral. I don't have to send you a card on your birthday, but you were there for my parent in the time of need. Was it purely altruistic? The aide gets a salary, the aide gets paid. It doesn't make a difference. You're someone who did something for my parent in their time of need. And I think the halacha is saying, Rebbe was teaching us that this woman who was his wife, it's true, she was not the biological mother of his children, but this woman gave Rebbe companionship. This woman provided Rebbe with home. This woman provided Rebbe with simcha, with happiness. And as such, Rebbe was telling his sons, you have to give honor to her, because she gave me so much during my lifetime. And the Shulchan Aruch is telling us that is indeed the ethos of the halacha as well. The technical obligation to honor a step-parent ends with the death of the parent, the biological parent. But at the same time, from a human perspective, to recognize that this step-parent gave my biological parent so much, all of the things that we enumerated before. And therefore, even though my biological parent is gone, my sense of gratitude to you, the step-parent, who enriched my parent's life in such a dramatic way, even though I no longer have a technical legal obligation to honor you, but nevertheless, davar hagun lechavdam af la'achar misa, it is appropriate to recognize the beautiful contribution that the step-parent made to my parents' life and continue to honor them even after the death of the biological parent. Again, halacha also teaches us in a greater sense the importance of gratitude and how, we are known, I've mentioned this concept many times, we are known as Yehudim. So we translate that as Jews, but of course, again, Yehudim comes from Yehuda, the tribe of Yehuda, which the root of that name is Hapam Odes Hashem Leah Imenu, says, this time I will thank God, gratitude. We are a people who knows how to express gratitude. We are a people who know how to say thank you. And so the halacha is telling us to learn to say thank you to our parents, but also to learn to say thank you to our step-parents. Sometimes step-parents may not be the perfect parent. Being a step-parent is an exceptionally difficult job that the truth is, no one could be perfect at, for one simple reason. It's not dependent on you. It's dependent on the children, the biological children of the person you marry. And there are so many family complexities. But if a person has a parent who is remarried, to recognize the good that that person has done for my parent as part of our greater motif of gratitude, that whether or not this person was wonderful for me, not wonderful for me, at the end of the day, if this person, this step-parent in some way contributed to the positivity of my biological parent's life, I owe that person a certain sense of gratitude. I owe that person a certain sense of hakaras hatov. And therefore the Shulchan Aruch says, even when the legal obligation ends, continue to be mechabed, continue to give honor to that person who was mashlim, who completed your biological parent's life, because that's the right thing to do. May we be zochem Meretz Hashem to give gratitude to our step-parents, to give gratitude to our biological parents, to give gratitude to our spouses, to our children, and to find a way to express gratitude to all those who enrich our lives in big ways and in small ones. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.